Michael, what's up, man?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here uh,
Oh, thanks for
on
having me on.
on short notice. Man, you like to get things done, don't you?
Yeah, I'm pretty busy. You happen to be catching me in kind of a transient mode. I'm in the process of moving down to Alabama, so I'm in Alabama searching for a house, staying in a buddy's Airbnb right now. So, yeah, time is a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, I understand. So you and I kind of have run around in similar circles. You know, they overlap. You know, we're both in the shooting world. You shoot a
Sure.
NRL, some PRS, but that's mainly practical shooting. Is kind of your cup of tea. Where mine is, F class. You know, I guess I'm gonna call that specialized type of shooting because the stuff that we use, you wouldn't ever use it on day to day hunting or anything. However, I have played around with some PRS, and so I think we know a lot of the same people.
Yeah, absolutely.
How how do you even get to PRS, or what was your introduction to that type of sport?
Well, back in about 2007 or 2008, I was out on a hunt with a buddy. Um, and there was a deer at 400 and some yards. And he's like, hey, just hold, a little bit over his back and you'll hit it. Well, I didn't hit it. And I don't really deal well with failure. And it was kind of like I had no idea what went wrong, why I missed, any of those things because I was clueless. I had no education in it. I don't really deal with failure well. So if I fail at something, I typically tend to dive right in and try and get better. And that sent me on the hunt for precision rifle instruction, basically long range shooting instruction. I got pretty busy with the military there for a while. And at about 2009, 2010, I can't remember when, I linked up with a guy named Kalen Wojcik of modern day sniper fame now, but back then he was running a small training company, Central Cascade Precision. And I took a precision rifle course from him, really loved it. He said, hey, you should check out some competitions. Back then, the Northwest scene, I was up in Washington State, was really, really heavy into, long range shooting competitions because we have the space for it up there. Got into a couple competitions, ended up leaving to go overseas for like about 3 years. So I never really got into it. Came back. And when I came back in 2015, PRS was just everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. And I was like, man, I got to get in on that. So it all started for my quest to be a better hunter. And it's, PRS, I would, you say F class is specialized. I would make the same argument for PRS. Like, well, some guys can hunt with their PRS rigs depending on the style of hunting and where you live in the country, but it's pretty specialized. And then after I got deep into PRS, I found the NRL and then the NRL Hunter, and I've kind of gravitated more towards NRL Hunter, but I still love shooting PRS as well.
What is the difference between PRS, NRL, and NRL Hunter?
So NRL, regular NRL as we would call it, went away. It's now just either NRL Hunter or PRS. The way I describe it to people is like the difference between Formula One and rally car, right? Like Formula One is the pinnacle of science, the pinnacle of technology. It's like, hundreds of thousands of seconds is the difference between winning and losing. And PRS is that kind of that way as well, while still, maintaining some practicality in movement, modified positions, stuff like that. So it's the science of putting a bullet on a piece of steel, far away, very small, very precise. Um, NRL Hunter is more of a practical style. It was developed by a guy named Scott Satterley, um, and it's you find, range, and engage your targets all on the clock. So there's a little more added stress there. There's a little more physical nature to it. It's all blind stages. So you have to run up to your stage, find your targets and then engage them. There's a weight limit on the rifles, which is a huge deal. And that's kind of the way I describe it is like PRS is more like Formula One. It's the pinnacle of, shooting. Like guys are doing stuff in PRS now that we would have thought impossible, 10 years ago. NRL Hunter is a little more rally car. It's a little more the Indian than the arrow. It can be a little, I don't want to call it sloppier because that's not the right word. Targets tend to be just a touch bigger, not big, but just a touch bigger. And it's much more seat of the pants flying. You're by yourself. There's no sharing wind calls. Nobody else can see what you're doing. It's a very individual sport.
So back to when the reason that you started shooting competition, NRL Hunter would have been perfect for what you wanted to do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It just didn't exist back then.
Right. Well, my story's similar. I started shooting competition because I went to Colorado and they said there was a bull that we saw there yesterday. Sit here, and if you see it, shoot him. And I ranged it. It was like 450 yards or so. And then I started to panic. I thought, well, if it comes out, what am I going to do? What if I miss? And all these scenarios started running through my head. So the bull ended up never showing up. But I did promise myself that when I came home, I was going to learn how to shoot long range. And that's literally where it all started. So very similar.
Yeah, I hear this story a lot. There's a lot of guys that get into it that way. I think as the shooting sports, the long range games have kind of gotten bigger, some of the guys get into them just for the sake of getting into them. But I think predominantly, especially if you started in the last, 10 years ago, it was to get better at hunting.
Right. So you get started, you come back from the military, all this is blowing and going. What, because there's different classes in PRS. What did you start shooting there?
So I was really, really lucky. We had some mutual friends who were really good friends with a local gunsmith who is, 15 minutes down the road from me. Matt Yore of Sawtooth Rifles, fantastic gunsmith. And my buddy's like, hey man, like I know you're the kind of guy that if you're going to do something, you're going to get all the way into it. And if you kind of go in cheap or you try and get by, you're just going to be disappointed. So I went and got basically a full rig right off the bat. I started with a 6.5 Creedmoor, custom build from him, and that's how I started going.
That's really the most economical route that you can take.
You know,
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's literally the most economic route.
in the long run, it does tend to be. Now, I think the argument can be made that since then I've spent, I've lit a big pile of money on fire. But what I see a lot is guys try to cut corners and they end up getting frustrated, and it actually lengthens your learning curve too, because that was one variable that I could eliminate right off the bat was my rifle system and the ammo I was shooting was really great. So if it was a miss, it was either me or the environmental factors. So I see a lot of guys getting frustrated because they don't know if they missed because it was their rifle system, their ammo, environmental factors, them, and it can turn into like this cat chasing its tail thing. I was really lucky that somebody, I had a mentor that steered me in the right direction immediately, and I can just eliminate that variable.
That's very important to eliminate the equipment as the one that's missing, because as you just said, it shortens your learning curve because the feedback is accurate, right? If you miss, you go, oh, I missed left. Whereas if the rifle doesn't shoot, you miss left, you correct right, now you miss right, and now you're thinking it's the wind, and it's just all these. And plus, when you're new to the game, you got too many things going on already. Add that on top, that the fact that you don't have a consistent system, and
Yeah,
it just turns into frustration in no time.
absolutely. And this game can absolutely crush your soul if you let it.
Oh man, I've shot some PRS. I'm no good at it, but it was fun anyway. And I'm pretty good friends with Chad Heckler and Francis, and we talk. And they've asked me, like, when you shot PRS, and they kind of asked me about my mental process. I said, dude, it was chaos. Like from the time that beeper went off to the time it went off again, it was just chaos in my head. There was no planning. There was nothing. I had a plan, but once the timer started, it just all went to shit on me real quick. So, and I'm a pretty experienced shooter, however, not in PRS. So yeah, it can be quite frustrating, but I did not have any rifle issues. I knew that if I missed, I never blamed the rifle because I knew it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that like the NRL Hunter takes that stress and magnifies it because now you don't even know where your targets are. So it's definitely a different kind of pressure. But yeah, the better the equipment that you have, the easier time you're going to have learning and getting better.
So I just did something with Gavin from Ultimate Reloader called the Rock
Okay.
Chuck Olympics, and the very first stage was very similar to what you're describing. They called it the hidden rock chucks. We had 5 minutes. It was 10 different targets hidden, but they did have flags kind of pointing you in the direction that they were,
Hmm.
and we just had to go in there and on the clock find the targets, engage them, move on to the next one, and it was quite stressful trying to find 10 different targets.
Yeah.
It sounds
Oh
like a
yeah.
long time, 5 minutes, but
It's not.
it
Yeah.
wasn't.
It's all relative.
Yeah, it was tough, but it was fun. I mean, after the fact, I was like, man, I want to do more of that. So now, that's that was all center fire back then. Now there's a big movement for rimfire, correct?
Yeah, rimfire is huge, and I think it's mostly due to the accessibility of it. Centerfire, you need some land, you need a long ways to shoot safely. Out west, it's a little easier because you have a lot of public land that you can shoot on, BLM land and stuff like that. Out east, ranges that go out to 1,000 yards or so aren't that common, so it can be a little restrictive. Whereas the 22 stuff, A, the ammo is way cheaper. And B, I think you can shoot it anywhere you have, 300 yards. I mean, 300 yards is a long shot for a 22. Um, you can run, 22 style matches and get some training in and have some fun. And, it's less noisy. I think it's more youth friendly, that kind of stuff. So I'm excited by the 22 stuff. I love to see the growth. I haven't had time to really shoot any of it because, I'm so busy with PRS and NRL stuff. I don't have time to do another series, but it's been pretty cool to watch the growth of that in the last, 4 or 5 years, especially.
Yeah, it's from what I can tell, it's doing really well. I think they had it here in Texas, the finale. I guess it was last year or a year
Hmm.
before. I don't remember, but I went, and man, there was so many people there. And like you said, it's even more spectator friendly because it's not as loud. You can communicate with people. You can have a conversation.
Yeah,
Most people are not even wearing ear pro when they're off the line. It's pretty comfortable walking around
yeah,
there.
I agree.
The What do you think this is? Which direction do you think this is heading? Because PRS is blowing up. I mean, it's still growing, and now they're having world championships and things of that nature. So it's still moving forward. Uh, the NRL hunter stuff, I hear a lot about it. Now the rimfire stuff is growing. Where do you see it going in the next 5 years?
Man, what a great question. Um, I'm not sure if I had that crystal ball, like I think I would be a lot wealthier guy, but I, I'm hoping that it continues to grow. What I'm starting to see now is as these sports grow and sponsors come on board, I'm seeing more and more people get involved. And what I would like to see, as opposed, because I'm not going to say where it's gonna go. What I would like to see is us becoming more mainstream, us reaching a wider audience. I think as big as PRS and NRL Hunter and the 22 stuff seem to you and I, to the average American out there, they've never heard of that kind of stuff. Um, so I would like to see it become more recognized as a sport as opposed to, kind of this grassroots hobby. Because when you look at the numbers, PRS is, and NRL, even if you combine both of them, we're a fraction of something like, say, golf or
Even
tennis.
archery.
Yeah, even archery. Archery is massive. I don't think a lot of people realize how big archery is. And there's a lot that we can learn from these sports, and how to grow and how to develop and how to become more mainstream. And I'd just like to see it continue to grow. And I'd like to see us become great ambassadors of the Second Amendment and just, shooting sports in general.
That's where I see the 22s as being a huge benefit to us as a whole because most people are not intimidated by 22. And I think that's going to be possibly the gateway to get a lot more people into the sport that are possibly not as comfortable with rifles.
Hmm.
That they possibly wouldn't go shoot a center fire match. But you bring
Yeah.
them in with a 22, they'll have fun, and then they'll get to meet all these great people, and then they'll more likely want to try the centerfire stuff, right?
I
And
agree.
that's where I think the 22 is huge for the sport.
Couldn't agree more. And I think it's, you just gotta, like any business, you just gotta get people in the door. And generally, when people get to hang out with the people in this community, even for a little while, they want to come back. Like it's such a great community. I mean, outside of, my small niche community in the military, I think that this precision rifle shooting community has become the most cohesive, like give you the shirt off his back. You want to try out how many places where a guy will just let you shoot a $10,000 rig and blow, $50 of his ammo down the tube just to see if you like it. That's the kind of stuff that our community does really well. And I'd like to see that continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, that's also my story. When I went to the first F class match, I just wanted to go see, and the RO at the time, Mark Farr, he said, "Hey man, you're the new guy," because I had emailed him, and he says, "Where's your rifle?" I said, "Oh, I didn't bring one. I'm just here to watch." He goes, "No, no, no, here." So he hands me his full blown custom rifle, and he goes, "This is what you're gonna shoot today." And
Yeah,
I
that's
shot it,
awesome.
and I was just blown away. And man, I have never left, and I don't know, it's a great community for sure.
Absolutely.
So now you shoot, you get into shooting sports, and now you're pretty heavily involved. Like you said, you're full blown PRS and NRL hunter. Uh, you also have a YouTube channel. Talk about
Hmm.
people helping each other. That's you know I do that, and I see you doing that as well. That's possibly the best way to help people, is just social media. Why
I
why
agree.
did you start a YouTube channel?
Well, actually, that's a really great story too. So my wife Keely had just gotten into the shooting. I got into it originally, and then I took her to a course, and she really took to it like a duck to water. I mean, she's a phenomenal shooter. I still think like if I were to take Keely and resource her and put her in like F class or something where it's just like the fundamentals of marksmanship, breaking a trigger, and knowing your data, I would put her against anybody. She is such a phenomenal shot. Now, when you start adding movement, moving a heavy rifle, time limits, like the stress, the physical stuff, that's where she finds her challenges. But as we were growing, we would make these mistakes, and then somebody, a pro or a friend, would be like, hey, if you'd have done this, you would have been more successful. Or, hey, do it this way, try this. And we would have these light bulb moments of like, oh my God, if I had known that, I would have done so much better. So what we decided to do is kind of share our journey. The attitude we've always taken with our YouTube channel is, we're not the experts. We're not the know-it-alls that tell you have to do things our way. What we're doing is we're sharing the knowledge that we find along the way, and we like to have experts like yourself, or like one of our more recent videos was Michael Bacglieri of Loophole, how a scope works. Have these guys with this knowledge that can share this information and just get it out there, because I mean that's why the internet, social media, all that was originally designed, was to share the knowledge, and that's what we wanted to do. So that's what started our YouTube channel, and it's done really well, and we're really pleased with it.
You you threw me in there as an expert, um, but I started just like everybody else. I mean, I was
Sure.
literally trying to uh, just share my journey, and same deal. I mean, for me, it was mainly reloading. I was trying to learn reloading, and I was reading. You can imagine, what's out there, just
Oh yeah.
tons and tons of internet pages, forums, all kinds of stuff. So I was reading everything, trying to get better. But then I had to put it together. So, and my whole life, I'm always been about testing. Just test it for yourself, because it doesn't always work for everybody.
That's
So I
true.
figured, I'll test it, and then I'll just share my results, right? And it might work for some, but that's how it started. It was all about, I'm, and to this day, I'm always asking others. I'm still in the learning mode,
Right.
but that's how you get there, I believe. If you're curious enough to to learn from somebody else, you're always going to get better, and
Sure.
that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's helped us and people comment is they like that we admit our mistakes and we share like we haven't done one in a while, but some of our earlier videos, we would show a disaster stage where we just bombed it, just screwed it up. And, you know, more people will send us private messages because they don't like to put their stuff out on the internet, but they're like, oh man, that was me. I can totally relate to that. And I think that's what helps. You know, there's a lot of people out there that like to beat their chests and tell you how great they are, and you know, you should listen to them. And we've always kind of taken the opposite approach, just like this is what we found. You know, go check it out.
Well, this is a great example. You know,
Yeah,
I found this to be the most efficient way to pick somebody's brain. And again, I'm gonna get something out of this conversation, but people watching, somebody's gonna get something out of it, and they can watch it
sure.
again 6 months later, and they'll pick up on something different. You know.
Yeah.
So you talk about positional and PRS and all that good stuff. What's the if there was one thing that just I don't know changed everything for you that made maybe something finally just clicked for you? Is there such a thing?
I think it's when I had the realization, because I got some really solid fundamentals and really good instruction right off the bat, and then I started down this path of uh, chasing tips and tricks and little pieces of equipment that would make such and such easier. And I was so focused on the game that I wasn't necessarily working on my fundamentals as much. And when I realized that the great shooters, the guys, you know, the Francis, the Chads, the Morgan Kings, the Austin Orgains of the world, and there's a ton more, I can't list them all. There, when I interview these guys and I talk to them, what I find from them is when they're in the process of shooting a stage, the only thing they're thinking about really is the wind and their fundamentals. They're not thinking about these little tricks and tips and, you know, if I just move this here, move that there. And I was getting hung up in minutia. Whereas if you just work and refine your fundamentals and work over and over and over and over on your fundamentals, those other little tips and tricks will become easier to implement as opposed to it's like building a house, right? You want your foundation to be strong. And if you keep adding a bunch of crap on top of a weak foundation, you're going to have to tear it all the way down again to build that foundation up to use those things. And there's a really great phrase that somebody used, and I can't remember who told it to me. It might have been one of the modern day sniper guys. Is don't learn the tricks of the trade before you learn the trade itself. And I think when that kind of hit home, I started seeing a lot more success. And by success, I mean, you know, at my level, I'm not at the top. I don't have any golden bullets or anything like that from the PRS. So I'm still growing and still learning.
You know, the Robert Brandley is the one that said something that it's so simple, but yet it clicks so hard in my brain. He said, "Don't break the shot if the crosshairs are not on the target."
Yeah.
It's so simple. However, it made me slow down because sometimes I just wasn't stable, and I was just trying to break the shot as the crosshair moved past the target and try to hit the target. And when he said that, I thought, man, this is so simple. And it just if I was not stable, I would move around or do whatever to get stable. And then guess
Yep.
what? I would only break the shot when it was on the target. So my hit percentage went up. I slowed down everything. Anyway, the point is everything got better, and it was something so simple.
Yeah, I love Robert. He's a great guy.
So Michael, how do you think we can make the sport bigger?
Well, if we're talking about making the sport mainstream, it has to become in some way, shape, or form a spectator sport. And you know, when you look at there's a lot of similarities between golf, right? Golf is this multi-billion-dollar animal. It's everywhere, you know, massive major sponsors and everything else. So you're never going to get to that level without the ability to make it somewhat of a spectator sport. And there's a lot of ways now that you can do that. Um, One of the big things that I'd like to see is integration of electronics into what we do. So there's a lot of different systems out there that you can use to where a guy shoots a shot, it hits a target sends a signal to a light. Okay, A, that's a hit. B, if you can send a signal to a light, now you can send it to a computer, and now you can have electronic scoring. Now you have a computer, you can put that up on a leaderboard that everybody walks past. I don't know if you're familiar with the guys from Ultimate Ballistics up in Canada. They're doing a really great job and doing some cool stuff of making matches live, updating, live scoring, so you can watch and see. Like at the AG Cup, I could shoot a stage, walk over to the monitor, and see where I stood with everybody else. It's pretty cool. I think that is step one, is to get that leaderboard so people can see it. Step two is we got to find ways to get the audience into the scope, being able to see what that shooter sees. Because, I mean, yeah, you can see a guy on a position, but in order to experience it, you kind of have to see, the reticle moving and, oh, that's a bad position. Or, you can see a great shooter, like say Austin Bushman, you could say you see me shoot and you see my reticle doing this, and then Austin Bushman comes up there and it's just steady and he's hitting his target. And I think once you can start to do that, now you can make it into a spectator sport that is marketable. Maybe you can go on TV and some other things. And that's how we expand our reach. And when you become a spectator sport, now you can start to bring in, big money sponsors. Don't get me wrong, like, there's great sponsors that give a lot to this community, but none of the sponsors in the shooting community can hold a candle to Ford or, Budweiser or whoever, that's a major corporation. So I think that we need to start looking into advancing that side of the sport just as hard as we're looking at, refining, bullets and everything else. I think that there's a lot of room for growth in how to get spectators out to this thing. And then when you start getting spectators, you're going to start getting more participants too.
Mike Downey was my mentor when I started F class, and he said, there's never going to be any money in shooting sports unless you can bet on them while you're sitting on your couch drinking beer.
Yeah.
And he says any sport that makes money, you can do that. And we actually started doing that in F class. We call it the V squared finale. We turning it into spectator sport. We actually have a YouTube channel called F Class Point Series. But we invite the top 32 F Open, top 32 FTR in the country, and we pit them up head-to-head, double elimination bracket format, and they shoot on the same electronic target and they alternate shots so that nobody gets an advantage. And it's pretty interesting to see because we have a camera right in front. We have a camera right in front of them, and you can see how their behavior changes and how you can see them get frustrated, and you can see their guns start to get bigger on target as they get frustrated. And the ones that are really calm, it seems like the gun is shooting better. They're making better decisions, better win calls. It's very interesting to watch it. And, you can rewind it, watch it again. They make a bad call. They open the bolt real stiff. It's just very interesting. But anyway, we're doing that in F class, and I agree with you 100%. It needs to be a spectator sport, and I think the real growth is finally going to happen.
I think so. And we're getting there. There's products coming out like the Trigger Cam. I'm sure you've seen it, where you can Wi-Fi broadcast from the Trigger Cam unit exactly what it sees through that scope. And it's just we got to have the right guy with the right equipment and the right brain to come along and turn that into a system that works so we can broadcast stuff. I think you've got some form factor issues with stuff like Trigger Cam. If guys feel like it affects their performance at all, they're just not going to use it. So, as the technology grows, it'll get there. But, like I use it in some of my YouTube videos. You can actually see me break the shot where my reticle was. You can watch, the resolution in those cameras is getting pretty great now. You can watch trace, right there in the YouTube video. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, on that V square finale, that's one thing that I would like to do, because we don't know where they're aiming, right? Because we in F class we use the rings on the target to aim, so it would be very interesting to know. Especially, it'd be like poker, right? Like you can see everybody's cards, but they can't see them. I think it'd be great, especially in F class, because let's say one guy holds three lines to the right and center punches the X, right? And the other guy is about to hold 2. Before he pulls the trigger, he's about to drop a point, right? And I think that would add so much more entertainment value. Also, I would like to add This is my checklist. Heart monitors.
Oh yeah,
I think
see
that would
everybody's
be.
pulse
Oh
just
man.
go up.
Oh, you would see. And you know how I know? Because I was shooting and my watch, I'm literally just
Oh
there
yeah,
laying down shooting and my watch starts beeping that I need to get up and walk around. And because my heart went to 100, over 120, while laying there. And it's just stress where,
yeah,
I was cause it's double elimination and I had already lost one. So all those matches were elimination matches. So it just
yeah.
becomes even
There's
more stressful.
there's so much great stuff out there. We just got to have somebody come along and put it all together and package it up and make it into a deliverable product to the masses. Again, I think we're really, really close. I think the stuff is out there. We just need somebody, and when I say somebody, I mean somebody with some funding to be able to make it happen because it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah, it'll be fun though. So I was watching your YouTube channel the other day, and there's this video that you did called "No One's Coming to Save You."
Oh yeah, yeah.
Man, that is such a great video. I don't know if you realize it, but it's a really good message. Uh, why don't you tell us about that video and why you decided to make it?
Um, so it wasn't an easy decision for me, right? Like our YouTube channel is based around long range shooting and stuff like that, and this was kind of a departure for us. Um, I was there were a couple events, and I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but they were all scenarios where somebody died and they very easily could have not have died had they had just the tiniest bit of training or the the tiniest bit of information or equipment or whatever. Um, One of them was a hiker that had gone up into the Cascade Mountains. So in Washington, all your major population centers, well, the majority of them are on the western side of the Cascades. And they've grown now to where they're kind of up against the wilderness. And, these urban city dwellers like to go hiking. It's a big deal up in Washington, very outdoorsy as overall as a population. And there's this mindset in modern population centers now where everything is provided for you. If your house catches fire, the fire department's coming. If you dial 911, somebody's coming. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that as soon as they leave and get into the woods, all that goes away. Something as simple as rolling your ankle on a trail or a slip could be, the end if you don't know how to deal with it. And this hiker had gotten lost, and they didn't have a map, they didn't have any food, they didn't have any water, and they ended up dying. And it was kind of tragic, it just simple stuff like take a map, take a first aid kit, take some water, take some food. And they could have saved themselves, and they just didn't. They found a place to hole up and hide, and where they thought they were gonna, somebody was gonna come get them, and then they ended up dying. And I thought it was kind of tragic. And I'd seen a couple other things like that. Uh, I had just seen a ruling legally where a police officer, and I believe it was in relation to a school shooting, was just cleared because he was legally found to not have a moral obligation to save you. Like that isn't, a lot of people think that the police have to come save you. They actually don't. So that was kind of what precipitated that video, and it was kind of weighing on me. And I just, I was like, I'm just going to talk about this and make a video and see if I like it. And then I did. I showed it to a couple of people, and they're like, you need to put it out there. And that's what ended up happening.
Well, that happened here in Uvalde. The school shooting. Those cops,
Hmm.
they were there for over 30 minutes, and they just were not going in.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, on that video again, it's a really good one, and it's a really good reminder that, like you said, no one's coming to get you, or no one's coming to save you. We kind of went through the whole COVID phase, and I grew up ranching, I grew up hunting, I grew up fishing, and my wife was really worried, obviously, that what are we going to do? The grocery store, the shelves are empty, or they're running empty, and if nobody's working, who's going to resupply? You know what I'm saying?
Oh
it
yeah.
just like, what are we going to do? And I sat her down. I said, we're going to be fine. I said, I got guns and ammo, and I can just go to the ranch, shoot a hog. Uh, there's cows. We can milk the cows. I mean, it's we're gonna be fine. There's a river that runs through there. If you want fish, I'll go catch some fish. It's not that bad. Like literally, that's how I grew up. I'm like, it's not the end of the world. But we are used to living a pretty pampered life.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, having said that, there's a lot of things that you also talked about that I was like the whole take care of yourself, purify water, hunting, fishing, all that. I can feed myself. I mean, look at me. I can feed myself. But there's a lot more, like you talking about first aid. What do you do if somebody's choking? So if you I would like to hear from you if you could maybe just run down a list of possibly classes, courses, something somebody should take, that are basics that
Yeah,
everybody should know.
I don't want to come across as like some the way a lot of people will paint that as like a survivalist prepper or whatever. Like I'm talking like base level stuff, like your standard CPR class that is offered typically for free. You can go to like fire stations. Occasionally, we'll hold public classes where you can teach this stuff. But I think everybody should know the basics of first aid, how to stop bleeding, how to help somebody if they're choking. Um, those are two things that are very, very common, that lead to preventable deaths. A lot of people, I think, don't understand how common it is for a child to choke on something, a hot dog, a macaroni and cheese, like whatever, like maybe not macaroni and cheese, but it happens a lot. And with me, the mindset I've always been ingrained with is I would feel horrible if somebody died and I had an opportunity to save them and I didn't, just because I didn't have some basic training. So first aid, how to conduct hygiene, how to keep yourself and your environment clean, how to navigate with a map. And this has kind of gotten a little bit ridiculous now to where, like, I got in a car with a buddy the other day, and we went from the house to the range, something we've done a million times together. It's the exact same route. I don't know how many times we've driven it. And he mounted his phone, pulled up the directions, and hit go. And I said, hey, if you didn't have that, could you get there? He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I was like, you're pretty sure? Or, can you navigate without it? If I hand you a map, could you get there? He's like, I don't know. And it kind of blew my mind that, even the place that we've gone to over and over and over, he's still relying on, his Siri voice turns. So navigation, and then how to prep and prepare food. I don't think a lot of people understand how to prep and prepare food anymore, or even really where their food comes from. But that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. So, first aid, how to do CPR, some basic first aid. Uh, you also talked about how to defend yourself physically,
Sure,
how to
sure.
defend loved ones. And a very clear distinction that you made is you don't mean like a gun. That we should also be proficient with a gun, but also that should not be your first resource, right? Like,
No.
so talk about that, please.
So if you look at the statistics, and I'm not going to quote a number or anything off the top of my head, most of your deadly altercations start with some sort of physical contact, even if it's like shoving or pushing or wrestling or, whatever escalates to punches and kicks to, whatever. Um, and a lot of people really just don't know how to defend themselves or how to make space and get away from somebody, to provide that space to get to your defensive gun use. I think in the firearms industry, we're also gun oriented, that everybody's like, well, I train with my gun. Well, I'm hoping people are training with their guns. Um, that, they think if they have a gun, they're good. And they don't realize they may have to defend themselves for a little bit to make the space to be able to get to that gun and to stop the threat. But I think a lot of people just don't think about that stuff. They don't realize it, or little stuff like, can you run away? Are you physically able to run away from a bad scenario to where you don't have to use a defensive gun use? And I'm not telling everybody to run away or whatever. I'm not going to get into like shoot, no shoot scenarios or whatever. But like for me, my primary course of action is always going to be to de-escalate and avoid the confrontation and then make the space to get away. For me, the gun is the last line of defense.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. That's I took martial arts for a good while, and that was literally like number one, de-escalate, try to get away. Don't
Sure.
like that's the best defense, right? Just don't fight. So what?
Sure.
But yeah, it's tough, and I get it. I've been in that situation. I've seen so many people that it's hard to make that decision at that time, right? But you talk about run away from somebody, like, or be physically fit to run away, or if you have to defend a loved one or whatever, run towards, right? Like,
Sure.
just be physically fit enough to be able to move.
Yeah. And it's super easy to not be anymore.
Yeah, trust me, I know. What about you talk about let's talk about gun handling. What are some of the basic courses that you think everybody who carries a gun should take?
I think anybody who carries a gun should go take a defensive pistol shooting course. You should be very, very familiar with that firearm, how to implement it under stress, in different scenarios, as opposed to just going to the range and plinking off a box of ammo and, stuff like that. I think that, our industry is really great. There's a lot of really great instructors out there that can provide that instruction. And it's one of those things, there are moments in your life that happen where you may only get one chance to get it right. Like, God forbid, it's a gunfight. That is not the time to realize that you wish you'd have spent a week with somebody a year ago and got some training, right? You may only get one chance at those kinds of things. It's like going back to first aid, if somebody falls down or there's a car accident, this guy's bleeding out, and I can apply a tourniquet, I may only have that one chance to save that guy's life. And if I'm not prepared, then that dude may die, or whoever. So I do believe that we should go get some training. And it's not just gun training too. Like, there's a lot of really great life-saving medical type training that you can get out there, be it, trauma or, wilderness kind of survival, backcountry medicine kind of stuff. How to, splint an ankle, stop, make a makeshift tourniquet to stop bleeding, that kind of stuff. Those are all the kind of things that I recommend to people.
I was put in that situation about, I don't know, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Dad and I were working on a tractor, just fixing the tractor. And literally, I was on the tractor was idling, and I could hear faintly, like, obviously the tractor's on, but I could hear somebody screaming far away, but I could hear them over the tractor. So I turned off the tractor. Sure enough, somebody's screaming. Well, there's a factory across the street, from where I lived. So I just started running that way, and I jumped the fence, and I said, come over to the loading dock. There's somebody on the ground with his leg chopped off, and there's nobody else there. So I just go up to him, take off his belt, and apply a tourniquet because he's bleeding. And once I applied it, I started running towards where I knew the office was. So I'm having to run through a warehouse, and I mean, I'm booking it, right? So you talk about being able to run. Well, as I'm running, they come around the corner. So the guy that had hit him with a forklift went to go get help, but he just left him there bleeding,
Yeah.
So long story short, they show up. They had already called the ambulance and all that good stuff. So paramedics show up, and talking 30 minutes later,
That's a long time.
It is a long time. So they finally show up. They take care of him, and I go back home. They take him, and that's it, right? Uh, Fast forward 4 months or so later, I get a knock on my door, and it's the same man. He's
Yeah.
in crutches, and he said I saved his life. Had it not been for that tourniquet that I applied, he would have died because he was on blood thinners, and he was just there bleeding, you know.
Yeah.
But so I have been put in that situation. Trust me, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but I didn't even think. I just did it, you know, and I'm glad I did. But again, no training, no formal training, and I wish I would have had more, you know. And I've had a little bit ever since, but I think, after watching your video, I'm gonna go get more and get my family involved and friends and as many people as possible.
I think, even if we're just talking about the shooting community, something I've noticed, and we've started implementing, and it's really kind of grown in the NRL Hunter especially, um, is a good, like we always have a safety brief at matches, right? But how many people talk about an emergency action plan? Hey, if there's an injury, this is the person that's responding. The first aid kits are here. This is where we're going to tell the ambulance to be. This is where life flight is coming. So for us, we're often out in pretty remote areas, ranches, and stuff like that, to where, an ambulance isn't going to be a couple minutes away. It may be a helicopter that we have to get a guy. How many people know how to relay the information, that kind of stuff? Who's calling them? What are they saying? One of the things that I found, and I've incorporated in my briefs, and I'm starting to see it from other people. Somebody asked me, it's like, hey, an EMT. He goes, when you're calling for an emergency, say you're running a match and somebody gets shot, an accident happens and a guy gets shot. If you say somebody's going to got shot, your EMTs cannot respond until police arrive and clear the scene and tell them that they can come. And it was such an eye-opening thing that such a simple phrase had a connotation that can impact whether we can save somebody or not. So now, I always say, hey, when you call 911, we have had a training accident with a gunshot wound. So that way they know it's not like an active shooting or whatever. And so that help can arrive quickly. And again, it's just one of those little nuggets of knowledge that I had no idea on, that I'm trying to spread to people. And even if we just do that within shooting matches, be it F class, PRS, USPSA, 3-gun, whatever, like that's a huge help there.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that, but that makes sense
Yeah.
that they would treat it differently.
Hmm.
Yeah. The other thing, you talk about being able to read a map. It's how many people actually know the actual address of where you're at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, excellent. Yep.
How do you guide somebody there? It's yeah, it's I mean, we live in a great world, but at the same time, it's when when time comes that you need to be useful, it's under stress. The key word here is stress, right? Because that creates a very stressful environment. And I don't know, man. Like I said, I've been put in that situation, and I don't, I'm glad it went well as it could have went. But I stress out just a little bit just thinking about being put in that situation again.
Yeah, and I've seen so many instances online, especially in like major cities, where something is happening like that, and there's 20 people standing around filming it on their phones, and nobody's helping, and that just drives me up the wall. But
All they do is say, call the cops.
yeah,
And everybody's telling each other to call the cops. Yeah, it's again, it's a that's the world we live in. So to recap, first aid,
yep,
uh, get some physical training, get some self defense classes, some type, gun handling classes. What else?
I mean,
Navigation.
yeah, and again, like all of us, we're all busy, right? I have only so many hours in the day that I can, learn stuff or do stuff and still spend time with my family. YouTube is a great resource. There's a lot of great stuff out there. There's no substitution for just personal on hands training with a qualified instructor in whatever it is. And I'm not saying like, well, let's just take fighting, for example. I'm not telling you to go sign up to train to fight in the UFC. Just get a base level of knowledge, just some basic stuff. I'm not telling you you need to be a brain surgeon that can save somebody in the back of a bouncing car. Like, just get, basic level stuff. And I think if you apply that philosophy of, I just want to get 1% better every day, at whatever, just learn one thing a day. And if you can apply that kind of stuff to your life, you will become an asset instead of a liability. You will be the guy that somebody says, God, I'm really thankful you were there, instead of just another guy standing around watching bad stuff happen. So,
Yeah, for sure. Uh, I was going to ask you about carrying one in the pipe or not, but that's probably going to go haywire.
yeah, there's certain topics that become these giant, just dumpster fires that I don't feel like they should be.
Right.
I personally always carry one in the chamber because I train that way, and I feel comfortable doing it. I personally feel like if I'm in a situation where I am using a gun defensively, like fractions of seconds matter at that point, typically, and adding a step unnecessarily to me doesn't seem very intuitive, or I don't want to use the word smart. It doesn't make sense to me. I understand there's very, very strong feelings about it on the other side too. And, people are allowed to feel what they feel and think what they think. I'm not here to tell anybody how to live their life, but I choose to carry the other way.
Yeah, well, I'm the same way. I always carry one in the chamber, and I always envision myself, obviously, best case scenario is never having to use it. But
Sure.
like you said, create space. Somebody might be attacking me. I'm going to need one hand. Hopefully not. But if I do, one hand's going to be protecting myself,
Sure.
and the other one can be drawing. And if you need both hands to initiate the defense, then I think that's already a problem. But
My
that's just how
opinion
I feel.
is, yeah, if you are not comfortable carrying one in the chamber, that's a training issue that you need to solve to get comfortable doing it. But that's my personal stance. So if I get a bunch of emails and hate mail from this conversation, I'm just going to forward them all to you.
Yeah, just forward it to me, and I'll get my assistant right on it.
You're going to hit me with tuner brakes next?
Oh no, we don't, man. You're right. It's talk about just check every topic that's controversial lately. I don't even know how tuners became controversial. But they did. I mean, I kind of know how, but whatever. It's one of those deals that.
First world problems, right? We don't have any real issues, so we make some stuff up.
Yeah, and I'm glad, right? I'm glad that's what the things that we have to argue about, because, and it's not even, I have so much experience with them, and I think those people that have used tuners, they don't have a problem. They know they work, and that's it. And but then there's the other camp now. It's kind of like the and Brian and I talked about it. I went straight to Brian. We had a discussion, and people I'm sure have seen it. And
Yeah.
I told him, I said that the part I don't like about it is that people immediately pick a side, regardless of, just like, carrying one in the chamber or not. They're automatically going to jump on one side or the other, and the argument starts. It's not, hey, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it, or let me at least contemplate the idea of carrying one in the chamber, or vice versa, not carrying one, and do pros and cons or whatever. And then whatever works for you, do that, and then don't worry about it, right? But instead, immediately there's a line, and I'm on this side and you're on that side, and let's argue. And I don't like doing that. And again, you go to an F-class competition, bench rest, tuners up and down the line, even PRS, because it's another thing that could save you from having a bad match.
I agree. I think it's I don't know. There's a word here that I'm missing where it's something's a good example of a larger issue. Like tuners is a great example of like America as a whole, right? We just want to pick a side and we want to call the other people idiots. That's all we want to do. We don't want to find compromise. We don't want to try it to see if it works or maybe understand where the other person's coming from. We just want to pick sides and find a way to tear down the other side.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, whatever. I'm okay with that. Like I said, I use them. It just literally just saved our asses at the World Championship. Like the U.S. had not won the World Championship in 22 years.
We're talking
The
F
F class,
class now. Okay.
F class, yes. We went down to South Africa. I get there. One of my rifles is not shooting well. I start cranking on the tuner, and I get it shooting, and it shot great. The rest of the time I was there. Uh, I ended up putting both of my rifles on the 8-man team because some of their shooters there, their rifles they just didn't shoot. So I put my rifles on the line. My buddy Todd did the same. So Todd and I put 4 of the 8 rifles on the line. It's okay, right? That's what teammates do. However, once you started with a rifle, you had to shoot the entire world championship with that rifle, unless a mechanical failure happened. Well, one of the other rifles started to fall out of tune on day 1. It goes home for 2 days. The next morning, he went out to the range and he's doing a tuner test. And he got his rifle to shoot better. I mean, at 100 yards, he's just shooting it, testing different settings. He got to shoot better. Shot better the next day. We ended up winning by 5 points. 5 points out of what was the total? Let me do the math right quick because it's it's a lot of points. 3,600 points total.
Oh, wow.
We won by
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, that's small.
It's such a slim margin, and again, people can say the tuners don't work all they want, but we had a rifle that we had to fix, and we had he had a tuner on there, and the second day that rifle shot much better, enough that we didn't drop as many points. And when you win by 5 points, there's not that much there. But anyway, so whatever. I mean, everybody there, I know Team USA, you got to have a tuner. Many of the national teams, it is required that you have a tuner on your rifles because of things like that, right? And it saved my ass a bunch of times. But anyway, again, I'm not going to argue with people. Just, they say don't work, fine. They don't work. Don't use one.
Yeah, it became really apparent, when you start putting your opinions and your views out there to the internet, inevitably somebody is going to feel very strongly in the other way, and they're going to feel like they have to tell you. And especially with the YouTube channel, we always try to take a diplomatic approach, but there's some people you just, okay, yeah, man, like I get it, have your opinion. I'm just not going to talk to you anymore. Like this is devolving, and I don't want it to. So you feel your way, I'll feel my way, and we'll go our separate ways. But it is interesting how strongly people can feel about something so simple.
Yeah. And, I'm lucky enough that through my shooting career and my social media exposure, I also have access to a lot of people, much like you and
Hmm.
Brian and Jaden Quinlan from Hornady and all Kaylin Wojcik and all these guys, right? That I get to call my friends now. So when things of that nature pop up, I just call them up directly and say, "Hey, man, let's have a conversation," and we do, and we may at the end of the day agree to disagree, but we're still friends, right? Just mutual respect, and that's that. However, the problem is the following. That somebody's going to follow their side, and somebody's going to follow mine, and then the clash happens, which it's something that I can't avoid. But at the same time, like you said, there's some people that are just, they just dig their heels in, and that's that.
Yeah, and again, much like you do, I just like putting the information out there and letting people decide for themselves. I
Yeah,
don't tell
yeah, that's
people
the
how they,
best.
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm sorry.
that's the best. I said, no, that's the best, and again, my channel's always been about test it for yourself. Test it for yourself. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And
Sure.
that's that. And just because something doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean it doesn't work for nobody, and vice versa. Right. But it's, like you said, first world problems. I love it. I love that that's what we're arguing about and nothing
Right.
like something crazy.
Absolutely.
So let's get let's get past that subject. Um, you started with a 6 creed or 6.5 creed. You said.
That's correct. Well, I
Where are you at
originally I had a
now?
308 originally was my
Well, you
the
had to.
yeah, the course I started with when I took to the Kalen's course, what I took was a 308. Very, very quickly got away from 308. And again, I was really lucky that I had some mentors, like Scott and Kalen and those guys, Scott Satterley, um, very early on that could help me make those kinds of decisions. And, much like access to a range is a big deal, access to a mentor is huge. And I was lucky to get some good mentors right off the bat. Um, so where I'm at currently is now I'm a bit of a specialist, right? If I take for NRL Hunter, I'm taking either a 6.5 Creed or a 6.5 by 47. Um, for PRS, I'm shooting either Dasher, 6.5 by 47, and then I think I've experimented with just about everything, just because I get curious, right? Like 22 GT, I have one of those. We've built. Keely wanted to try it out. We're playing with that right now. So, if it's a longer range like the Night Force ELR match, I shot that with a 300 PRC. So I really like taking the right tool for the job, to the point where I think it's kind of hindered me a little bit in PRS. If I'd have just settled in and stayed with the Dasher a lot more, that whole like be more afraid of the one man with one rifle kind of thing, it probably would have helped. But I'm a tinkerer, man. I like playing with stuff. I like trying new stuff out. I like seeing if whatever. But I think as I've done it over the years, I do tend to gravitate towards six dasher or 6.5 by 47. Those are my two primary cartridges that I shoot pretty much across the board now.
Yeah, that Dasher, he's got a big following in every. It seems like every discipline. Bench rest, obviously, uh, PRS, F class. It's just a great cartridge. Very efficient.
It's the easy button, for lack of a better way to describe it. When it comes to reloading and everything else, it's just so forgiving.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. The 6BR, anything in 6BR that comes from a 6BR is just super easy. The what do you think? Let's talk about optics, because that's one that, man, it just keeps, seems like every 6 months or so some new scope pops up, or maybe a year. It seems like it's more often than that, but there's just so many advancements in optics. And let's be honest, you really don't need a $5,000 scope to shoot some of these matches.
Yeah, and I think we've proven that. Guys have won matches with a lot of different scopes at a lot of different price points. When you boil it all down, it is still the Indian, not the Arrow. Um, but great equipment helps. I think that if you have the means and you like the way a tangent theta looks, and that's what you like, then get what you like. I tell guys, especially because I get hit up a lot from newer shooters that are looking to get in the sport, and I try to find them like a best bang for the buck kind of like scope or rifle system or whatever, and have them settle in that. And I base a lot of that around reticle choice too, like what you see and what clicks in your brain, because that's your interface, right? The reticle is your interface with shooting, especially when you get into PRS and everything else. It's so critical. It's so important. I think, if you're talking about advancements in optics, I heard it from, I believe it was a gentleman out of the AMU, the Army Marksmanship Unit, that said, we live in the golden age of small arms shooting. And we've had more advancements in small arms, and we're doing this incredible stuff with it over the last 20 years than the whole entirety of history ahead of it. We're just growing so fast. I think it's great, and I love to see companies that are getting better and pushing each other and making a better and better and better product. Like I really see like Burger and Hornady, like the advancements they're doing in their bullets, especially those two, seem to really be, pushing the limit outside of like ELR and other specialty stuff. And I feel like with scopes, it really comes down to what's your budget, what reticle do you like to see, and then picking something that it gets in there. Obviously, I have my sponsors and I have what I love. Um, I've never picked an optic or anything based off purely off a sponsorship. I have to love what I use or I won't represent it. And for me, like the Loophole Mark V series is that really great sweet spot of great performance. It's won so many matches. It's won I don't know. I'm sure somebody, I should probably know a number, but I don't. But every time I turn around, somebody's winning a national level PRS match. I mean, it absolutely dominates the NRL Hunter because it is lightweight, which is a big thing. So it makes a great optic you can transfer to hunting and whatever. There are other scopes that may have better features in this department, or maybe slightly better glass, or maybe the color spectrum of that scope suits your eye better, appears brighter, like whatever. I think really when you boil it all down, it comes down to personal preference and your budget constraints. Some guys have no budget constraints. I wish I was one of those people, but I'm not. And it's just, again, and that's another one of those Ford Chevy guys that are super passionate about their scope or their rifle or their action or their whatever. And if you don't use that thing, you're screwing up. And I've never taken that stance. I think that there's a lot of really great stuff out there that you can win a match with. Maybe not me because I haven't won a match yet, but a national level anyway. But I think that we got to get past that, like that this is the only way you can do things.
Yeah. Like I have no budget constraints and I'm not rich. I'm just irresponsible. Okay, I'm joking, obviously. So, optics, the thing about that I notice is the advancements. Yeah, there's a lot of high end scopes that are advancing, and they're just creating new whatever. They're advancing, keep advancing, and the scopes keep getting more expensive. But that also brings up the lower end, the budget. The the budget optics are really good nowadays.
Oh yeah, you could take a budget optic at $1,000 now, and it would surpass the top of the line 6, 7 years ago, even.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I mean. So
yeah.
fast moving, advancements help all around.
And if we're going to talk about like PRS and Formula One, that's what Formula One does really great. There's a lot of technology that comes out of Formula One that you're seeing on cars now, like the kinetic energy recovery system that was pioneered in Formula One, or using brakes to recharge batteries, that kind of stuff. Aerodynamics to make cars more efficient, getting through the air, stuff like that. And I think PRS and NRL Hunter is doing a really great job of doing that too. Fortunate to be on some really great teams like MDT and Loophole, where they have a stable of shooters, and it's not just a hey, here, advertise our stuff. They actively solicit, advice, opinions. What do you like? What do you don't like? How can we make this better? Guys like Francis Cologne is a great example. Sometimes it's almost annoyingly so how much he wants to help and how much he can get into the minutia about the thing. And I'm like, Francis, this meeting's gone on for like an hour and a half, buddy. Like you're killing me. But he's giving such good feedback to the engineers, and they appreciate it. And as this, especially as we start to push the envelope of what's possible with shooting, we're going to see more and more and more great technology coming out.
Yeah, and that's the part that excites me, just because everything keeps getting better. You know, you talk about MDT. They're working on that electronic trigger. I saw that at SHOT Show,
That thing is
and that's
awesome.
got me all kinds of excited, even though it's already banned from F class
Oh,
before.
is it?
Oh yeah,
I had
so
no
F
idea.
class. Well, F class, they don't allow electronic devices on the line, so it was already kind of borderline. Uh, but they just revised the rules. But at the beginning of the year, and they they outlawed electronic levels. So they haven't technically outlawed electronic triggers, but if they outlawed the level, trust me, the triggers, it's going to be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Uh, but I still want to try it. I think
Yeah,
it'll be fun,
it's pretty interesting. It's a feel unlike anything I've ever felt before, and it was one of
right?
those when they mentioned it, I was like an electronic trigger. Like initially, I went to my military mindset, which is if it's electronic, it will fail. But then, they started getting into the science of it, and they won me over. Um, but it's just a good example of that, like outside the box. Like I would have never thought of that. I would have never have thought to even go down that path, much less bring it to market like they're doing. But it's just a good example of like the sport is driving a lot of things. Um, the technology that we're producing out of these games is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was. I had a Green Beret on the podcast, and he said that they actually for training they bring in competitive shooters like 3 gun and things of that nature, so they
So
can say, okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I would say from my experience in the military and the special operations community, working with the top level of the special operations community, that community is really, really great at finding the absolute experts in their field and getting training from those guys. To supplement their military training. And, it used to be back in the day that the military was held in really high regard. Like if you were going camping in the 80s and you could get a hold of a military Gore-Tex or whatever, like, man, that was the ticket. Now you've got companies like Arc'teryx and that the military is like, hey, can you make that in multicam? Because I really want that. And if you're growing and the good units are, you're going to seek out that information from the pinnacle and get it from there. So I think you'll continue to see that. It's been around for a long time. The top military guys were going to world champion 3 gunners and pistol shooters. Hey, make us better. And then we'll take that and apply it to our military stuff.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good thing for the sport, obviously, right? Because yeah, we're we're competing for ribbons, but we're still pushing ourselves pretty hard to
Yeah,
be
and
as good as possible.
it was interesting. I can't remember when it was. It probably around 2017. I was on a deployment, and one of the customers that we support was getting on my helicopter, and strapped to his little belt with a bungee was a game changer bag. And I was like, oh, I know what that is. Like, it's cool to see it kind of moving over to the military community. And that was 100% developed for PRS. And now guys are using it to great effect downrange.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it works for PRS, it'll work anywhere.
Yeah.
I keep sandbags, either uh, Weebat or Game Changers and the fortune cookies, but I keep them in my deer blind because they. I mean, I literally leave them there because they're. I don't want to ever forget it now because I just throw it over the window and now the rifle's super stable. It's
Yeah. I mean, techniques like tripod rear, hunters are starting to use it, military guys are starting to use it. That came out of our world, you know?
yeah, we're talking about those camps when people started using tripods and PRS. They would the the example they would often use is, well, you'll never see a sniper use that. So
I disagree. I know
well,
for a
I know,
fact.
but that's what I mean. That was the original argument, and now to see them coming to PRS guys and say, "Hey, that's a hell of a good idea. We're gonna start doing that." You know what I mean?
I think that falls into, and I wasn't there, I don't know who said it. I would almost be willing to bet money that the person who said that was never a sniper who had to take a shot that mattered like that, because the people that have to do that kind of stuff will take any advantage that they can get. Anything that will make them better, they want to know how to do it. So it's it's just the difference in mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, all right, man. Thank you for being here. This has been great.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate it. It's good having a conversation with you.
yeah, likewise. Nomination time. Well, you get to nominate somebody you think I should talk to. I don't have to know them. Somebody that you say, you know what, I think you should talk to so and so.
Oh man. I think John Kyle Truitt of Foundation Stocks, if you haven't talked to him already, that guy is absolutely crushing being a small business owner, in addition to being a competitor, a great father, a great husband, all of it. Like he's such a good dude. And every time I have a conversation with him, I leave a little bit wiser and a little smarter than when I came into the conversation. So that's who I would nominate.
Awesome. Sounds like a great guest.
Yeah, and he's a great member of our shooting community. So
I have a foundation stock, so
yeah,
there's already a connection there.
yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah.